Hey everyone, welcome back to Coach Hall Writes. With the new school year starting, I wanted to offer 5 tips for success in AP Lang. Before we get started, let's be sure to stay in touch. If you are taking AP Lang this year, be sure to subscribe and turn those notifications on. That way you don't miss any upcoming AP Lang videos. Also, if you're a TikTok user, please feel free to follow on that app as well. Tip number 1 is going to be to read widely and purposefully. This means reading op-eds, speeches, essays, articles, and it can be over a variety of topics. I would start with topics that interest you or topics related to other courses that you're taking. You can also listen to podcasts or watch documentaries. As you're reading or listening, ask yourself, what is the author's argument and how do they support it? This will be the beginnings of rhetorical analysis. I would also encourage you to keep a reading journal or an annotation log. It doesn't have to be very fancy at all, but just taking some basic notes over what you're reading, watching, or listening to can help you generate possible evidence for future argument essays. It could potentially help with broader context for a rhetorical analysis or synthesis essay. By taking notes throughout the year and then reviewing them before you have to write an argument essay, it could be potentially a way to help you study. Now, I can't promise that the articles you read or the podcasts that you listen to will automatically be able to help you with an argument essay, but it's possible that they could. Also, by reading widely and purposefully, you're becoming a more informed citizen. Because commentary can be one of the most challenging parts of any of the AP Lang essays, you can kind of soft launch the commentary by practicing the says, means, matters technique. So, says is what does the evidence literally say? Means is what does it imply or suggest? And then matters, that's where the commentary really kicks in because you're asking yourself, why is it significant to your argument? Personally, as an AP Lang teacher, I start out with paragraphs first before we ever move into a full essay. And I give my students questions like this. I do tweak them a little bit for the assignment that we're working on in order to help them avoid summary and to deepen their analysis. Because when we're writing an AP Lang essay, we don't want to merely summarize the evidence. Instead, we want to make sure that we are actually having our own voice shine through and offering commentary or analysis. And that can be admittedly a little bit tricky at first. So the says, means, matters approach is one way to help students kind of ease into that. Another tip for success in AP Lang is to make sure that you actually plan your essays. Don't just wing it. I encourage my students to do a quick outline for a timed essay, but many of their first writing assignments are ones where we have more time in class to fully outline it and plan and prepare. I know some students think they can do it all in their head, but I have seen this backfire so many times. I've seen students start writing an essay, get halfway through, and then they want to change their argument. So please make sure that you have a plan in advance. Your plan should include a clear thesis. So that's going to be the overarching claim of your essay. You also want to make sure that each paragraph has a clear main idea. Now, that main idea should be related to your thesis. You also want to organize your paragraphs in a logical order. This is going to help create something called a line of reasoning. Then to continue that line of reasoning, you want to plan your evidence and your commentary. Now, in my opinion, if you are planning an essay, especially if it's a timed essay, bullet points are fine. Of course, if your teacher has a more detailed, more specific assignment, follow those instructions. But in general here, my advice is that if you are writing an essay in class, make sure that you have a plan. And if it's a timed essay, it might seem counterintuitive, but you should take a little bit of time to plan. It might feel like you're eating up some of your writing time, but in actuality, having a plan is going to allow you to write more quickly and more coherently. Another tip for success in AP Lang is to use sentence frames to build confidence. Think of sentence frames as training wheels. They guide your thinking in your writing. I started incorporating sentence frames into my lessons when I realized that several students had great ideas in classroom conversation and discussion, but then when it was time for them to actually write down their ideas, they would get stuck. The sentence frames are kind of a starter that helps students better articulate their ideas. They can also be helpful if you're struggling with commentary. Now, I have sentence frames for thesis statements, transitions, commentary. So if you're curious, I will link those videos in the description below. And teachers, I also have some resources for you. The idea behind sentence frames is to help students articulate their ideas, and this will help students avoid repetitive phrasing because sometimes under pressure, we tend to use more simplistic language and we tend to repeat the same sentence starters. One argument against sentence frames is that it can lead to more formulaic writing. And I will concede that it might appear that way. However, what I've noticed as a teacher is that when I give students a sentence frame, they complete it in their own individual way. Their essay still feels unique and it still has their own voice and their own ideas. Also, what I've noticed is that the more students become comfortable with those sentence frames, the more they start to develop their own voice and they rely on sentence frames less. My final tip for success in AP Lang is to create a schedule that works for you. Now, this is more of a holistic student tip as opposed to just specifically an AP Lang tip. But I've noticed that a lot of students take AP Lang in junior year. And even when I was in high school, they told us that junior year was the hardest. Looking back, I suppose that was true. But even as a teacher, I can see that a lot of students start to take more AP classes as a junior. It's also when you're starting to think about college and your future. You might have a job or be involved in clubs or sports. So there's a lot going on. And being an AP student on top of that means that you are taking more rigorous classes and you might have a more intense workload. So we want to build those good life habits and good study habits. These habits will then translate not just into senior year, but also into college and your professional life. So a couple tips for you. One would be to put all major due dates and reading deadlines in a digital or paper calendar. Personally, I like a digital calendar. I make reminders for myself on my phone, and if it's really important, I set it as an event on my Google Calendar. You might prefer to use other apps. In fact, if you have suggestions that are more student friendly, let me know in the comments. You can also totally use a paper calendar. Some people prefer that as well. You want to break your larger assignments, like essays, into smaller tasks. Sometimes if you just think, oh, I have this huge paper to write, it can be very overwhelming. So break it into smaller components and then assign each of those components a completion time. This will help you to avoid procrastinating till the last minute and rushing to get it done. If you intend to self-study in any way, whether it be for AP Lang or another class, set aside a consistent weekly time to practice essays, to read, to revise, maybe to go over your A-push notes if you're taking that class, whatever it is. I would personally set that event as a calendar event in your phone, set it weekly, and what you do each week might change depending on where you're at in your coursework, but it can be a valuable study tool for you. Find which tools or which apps work for you. So I mentioned that I like Google Calendar. I also like to make checklists or to-do lists in my phone. But again, there might be other apps that are more helpful to you. But whatever it is, find a system that helps you keep track of everything and helps you streamline that process. Also, if you are involved in sports or other activities, like maybe ROTC or theater, or just a club that is very involved, like FFA is in our school, you're going to want to plan ahead for busy weeks. This is going to mean looking at the calendar and figuring out what assignments are due, talking to your teachers in advance, trying to get any of that work done ahead of time if possible. But also remember that some of this bleeds over into your personal life. I know that might sound a little bit silly, but sometimes the space we live in influences our mood. And so if you know that life is going to be super busy over a 2-week period, maybe before that 2-week period, see if you can get as many things caught up and planned out as possible, whether it's meal prepping or getting ahead on laundry or whatever it is. Remember, it's kind of like the essay tip I talked about earlier. It might seem counterintuitive, but if you spend time planning on the front end, then you're going to likely save yourself time later on. Thank you so much for watching. If you found these tips helpful, do me a huge favor and give the video a thumbs up. Also, be sure to share this with other AP Lang students who might benefit from these tips. And like I said before, if you have any tips for success, whether it's apps that you like to use to help you, or just other tips to stay organized and on top of things as an AP student, please go ahead and leave those in the comments as well. Also, if you are an AP Lang student, don't forget to subscribe and turn those notifications on. And if you're a TikTok user, remember I'm Coach Hall Writes on that platform as well. That's where I post my shorter content. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, happy writing!